Hello and welcome back to Beckler Guitars and Repair. So one of the things we like to do on this channel is I'll go out and I'll pick up a used guitar and we'll go through it right from the very start. So I just picked this thing up and we're going to go through everything, check out the condition, fix anything that it needs, and then put it back into the best playing condition as possible. So today we're checking out a Mick Abrahams from Jethro Tull. Signature model from Vintage Guitars. Let's check it out. So if you're unfamiliar with Mick Abrahams, he was the original guitarist for Jethro Tull, and then he started a new band and was the front man for a band called Blodwyn Pig. And if you're not familiar with the brand Vintage Guitars, it's a brand started by John Hornby Skews in Leeds, England, and they make kind of nice kind of copies of Gibsons and Fenders. I think they have some of their own kind of more original models too. And they've also partnered with Trev Wilkinson. Trev Wilkinson started Fret King Guitars. He's kind of a designer, a builder. He's got all sorts of different parts and components that are kind of less expensive, but people really like. They're really high quality stuff. So they've kind of partnered together with Wilkinson parts on this guitar. I think Vintage does that with a lot of their guitars. They partner with their Wilkinson parts, and it's just a pretty nice, high quality made, lesser expensive guitar. And this is the Mick Abrahams model. It's very similar to like the 61 SG style. It's got a two-piece mahogany body. It's a satin finish, and it's got like a stop tail bridge here. It's got a lightning bar, so it's got those compensated frets. It helps with intonation a little bit. Also, you've got these screws in the back that can move it forward or backwards to also help with intonation. Standard kind of like three-way pickup switch, two-tone, two volumes. We've got our golden speed knobs on there. It's got the 61 style pick guard, and then over top of that we've got the Mick Abrahams signature on the pick guard, and then we can see our Wilkinson P90 pickups, and it's top mounted, the output jack, and then we've got rosewood fingerboard. The neck is bound. There's no fret nibs or anything, but it's got binding on the neck. Rosewood fingerboard. It's got acrylic dot inlays, kind of medium jumbo frets. Looks like it's kind of a synthetic nut. Our truss cover only has the single screw, and there's the logo there as well. One thing they do change it up is the headstock's a little different. Instead of like an open book, it's like a couple open books. It's kind of bumpy here on the headstock, so it's kind of an interesting design. There's our Vintage logo there, and this one does have a couple nicks and dings. This is probably the biggest one here. I think the tuners have been swapped on here, and someone maybe have over tightened the tuner, and it's left a big chunk out here. So I might do a drop fill on that, color match it and do a drop fill. But other than that, it's in pretty good shape. I think got one little impression here, and the satin finish has kind of been worn smooth in a couple spots. And this one has been reliced as well. Like, it came like this from the factory. It's just a couple spots underneath the finish that have been worn to make it look like a more used instrument. And then we've got some chunks here that looks like someone has color matched, or maybe just used a marker or something. And yeah, the back is very similar to like a Gibson. We've got our same kind of a style cavity cover there. And the neck feels a little bit skinnier, maybe like a 60s style neck. And I noticed the headstock angle isn't quite as extreme as a Gibson, so that might change the way it feels to play it a little bit. Here's our machine heads, which are Grover Deluxe. Now, I think this would have came with Wilkinson tuners, so I think these have been upgraded. And then there's a look at our headstock with our serial number. It says vintage, a John Hornby Skews product, designed in association with Trev Wilkinson. So yeah, kind of a cool SG with some P90s. I've heard really good things about these pickups. They're not that expensive, but they're supposed to sound really, really nice. And overall, it seems like it's quite nice quality. It plays nicely. I couldn't find any issues with it other than, you know, a couple chunks out of it. I haven't plugged it in yet, so I'm not sure how it sounds or if the electronics work. But let's go ahead and get it on the bench and we can take a closer look. So here's a direct comparison beside my Satin SG Special. So you can see the body shape are pretty much identical. They're pretty much the same in terms of thickness and carve. The Vintage also has a 24.75 scale length and a 12-inch radius, just like other SGs. And yeah, everything looks very similar in terms of, you know, the shape and the carve and the size of the neck and everything else. And weighing in at just over 6.5 pounds, 6 pounds and 9.5 ounces, or 2.99 kilograms. And in terms of neck dive on a strap, it does want to dive a little bit. It's definitely not as bad as a lot that I've had with SGs before, because SGs are pretty much known for neck dive, especially if they're lighter. But this one, you know, it stays where it should pretty well. But if you move around a little bit, it slowly starts to make its way down. But not as bad as some. Here's a look at our pickup readings. In the bridge position, it's reading a 12.49. In the neck position, a 9.98. And in the middle position, a 5.54. So that also tells me that the electronics should be working. So here's a look at the tailpiece. So yeah, this it's labeled a BM116. So that is a Wilkinson part. It's a wraparound tailpiece with you know, a compensated lightning bar style saddles. So where these saddles are, you know, casted into the tailpiece, that helps with intonation. And you can also move the whole thing backwards or forwards with these little set screws on the back. So this is kind of a cool little tailpiece. It also appears to be made of nickel, and it's kind of got that pitted, worn look to it. It looks cool. And here's a look at our bridge post, very similar to like a Gibson. Looks like they screw right into these receivers in the body, and how you adjust your height is just by loosening or tightening this to increase or lower the height. So let's have a look at our pickups. So this is like a P90 style pickup. So basically it mounts to the body by these two screws in the middle of the pickup. So if you loosen those all the way and take them out, you can remove the pickup. It's in there kind of tight. Alright. So yeah, there we are. It looks like nothing special. You can take the top off. You can see here, oh, it looks like, so a P90 is considered a single coil pickup, but it looks here that it's actually a stacked single coil. So we got a coil up here with a magnet, and then an additional coil down below. So I'm assuming that's kind of like a dummy coil. You see that on some Gibson models. That should prevent any hum, when almost like a humbucker instead of a single coil. So you shouldn't get much noise from this with you know, overdrive or distortion. At least that's what I think. And here's a look at our body route here, and it looks nice and clean. It's got some shielding paint in there. You can see a little bit of tear out, but it's overall not bad. And again, there's this foam piece at the bottom of the pickup. This helps adjust the height. because when you put the screws in, if you loosen it, the tension of the foam will kind of lower it or raise it depending if you are loosening or tightening. So yeah, I looked up a little bit more info on this pickup. So it is the M series stacked P90 hum canceling pickup. And these are stacked hum canceling P90 with ceramic magnets. And you can see in our neck cavity here is more of the same. Just a nice route with some shielding paint. And ooh, you can see there in the neck join there that we have a long neck tenon. It's kind of hard to see, but see if I can see the outline there. I'll get a little closer. So yeah, you see that outline there on the bottom of the wood with a little hole there. You can see like the opening. That's where the neck joint is. So it's a long neck tenon, which is cool. And it looks like they sell these pickups on Amazon. You can get a full set for about $50 Canadian, which is a pretty good price for pickups. And here's a look at the pick guard. It's a nice 4-ply pick guard. It's nice and sturdy. And there's the Mick Abraham signature right there. I guess if you wanted, you could rub that off, but I don't mind the way it looks. And underneath the pick guard, yeah, it's just satin finish with our 4 pickguard screws. Trying to get into the back cavity, but it's very, very tight. So a trick that I like to do is just to get underneath it with like a razor blade, and then you can kind of pry the rest of it open. So there we go, that wasn't so bad. And then here's a look at our cavity here. So it looks like they're using mini pots, which is, you know, whatever. Mini pots are used in almost every single you know, stomp box pedal, and people don't seem to have a problem in those, and they rarely fail. But I think full size pots are just a little bit more robust. I don't think they have much difference in terms of like usability or sound even, but I think people do prefer the full size pots. But anyway, there's mini pots on here. We've got our little brown capacitors right there. And it looks like we've got 4 wires coming off of our pickups. So, and everything else appears to be stock. And then we've got our little import style 3-way switch there. So the route looks nice and clean, but the quality of the components are a little bit on the cheaper side. And while I'm in here, I'll just use a little bit of contact cleaner and spray them, you know, directly on the inside of each pot. And then I'll work the knob back and forth in the front. And this is just, you know, preventative maintenance, or if there is an issue with it when we plug it in, this will probably take care of it. I like to spray the 3-way switch as well, just directly into the switch here. And then you can just work these back and forth to work into the contact cleaner. And switch a couple of times, especially on older guitars, because that way when you plug it in, you're going to have no issues with pots cutting out or bad connections. I'm not sure if this needs it, but I mean, it's super quick to do, and again, it's preventative maintenance basically. So every time you open up your guitar, you can do a quick squirt of the contact cleaner just to keep things clean. So I'm having a bit of an issue putting this back into place now, because it's a little harder to get out, but it won't quite go into the ridges. Like there's a little piece that's kind of sits proud. It won't go into the recession of the cavity. So one trick you can do is you can actually pop this into the freezer for a few minutes, and the cold will actually contract the plastic, and then once you try to put it back in, it'll fit nicely. So I'm going to do that now. So there it is, still frosty. I just threw it in the freezer for about 5 minutes, and now it fits perfectly. So that's a useful little trick. Alright, I removed some of the screws from the headstock so we can get a better look at the damage here. So I think what happened is that these machine heads have been replaced, and sometimes the shaft of the machine heads won't quite fit in the holes, so sometimes you have to drill these out or ream them. The problem with drilling out, especially come from the back, when the drill bit comes through, it can actually tear out here. So I think that's what's happened in these 3 different spots, is that there's been some tear out. So I'm just going to go ahead and color match those and drop fill them, just so it's a little bit less visible. You're still going to be able to see it, but it's going to blend it in a little bit more, make it look a little bit nicer. To color match, I usually like to use a stain, or I have these different products that I use, but for black, I mean, it's just black. You can pretty much get away with using a Sharpie. I usually use like these big, super big ones because they give really even coverage. Sometimes with these thinner tipped ones you can get kind of streaky, but here's an example here. So yeah, I use that big marker for that, and it's pretty nicely color matched. Once I drop fill that, it'll look a lot better. I'm just going to do the same for the rest of these here. This one's got a little bit of a smaller working area, so I can't get the big tip in there. So I'm just going to use this for that. For the drop fill, for this one, I'm going to be using Max Bond Crazy Glue. It dries really fast, and it usually dries really clear without any bubbles. So I like to use this on poly finishes. I use different stuff for different finishes, but this works great for this kind of finish. Again, I'm not trying to make it perfect, I'm just trying to kind of blend it in so it's a little less noticeable, and to cover that bare wood, because if moisture gets into bare wood it can lead to swelling or cracking. So it's always good to seal anything that goes down to the bare wood in terms of dings and cracks and dents and that kind of thing. So now I'm just going to wait for it to dry. Alright, so they're all dry and they look quite a bit better than they did before, but they dried fairly glossy, and it's kind of a contrast to the satin on the headstock. So I'm just going to use a little bit of micro mesh here to scuff it up and lose a little bit of the luster so it matches the finish a little bit better. So yeah, here it is all finished. You can still see it up close obviously, but it's a little bit less noticeable, and everything's all sealed properly now. Here's a look at our truss rod. It's just got the single screw, and it's an Allen key style truss rod. I did check it and it's responsive. And there's a look at our nut. I'm not sure what material they're using. It kind of looks like a plastic or like a man-made ivory kind of a thing. And our frets are in actually pretty nice condition. I just need to clean it up a little bit and oil the fingerboard. But overall, there's no divots, hardly any wear, and our fingerboard looks nice and streaky. And yeah, the neck feels really nice too. There's no sharp frets at all. They're nice and smooth, and our end dressing on the frets looks nice as well. They're nice and rounded. As far as the body goes, just that one kind of impression there that you can see. One more right there. And the satin's been worn smooth in a couple spots. There's a few like dings throughout. Again, some more in the back here near the cavity plate. There's some dings, and looks like they've been sealed already though. And the back doesn't have any buckle worming or rash, so that's nice. And the neck itself doesn't have any large impressions or dings. There's a little bit of an impression in the wood right there, you can see. But overall, pretty good condition for this guitar aside from a few spots. And there's a look at our headstock swoop. So 1 swoop, 2 swoop, 4 swoop. So they kind of doubled that up to get past Gibson's patent on the headstock. Alright, I'm going to rehydrate the fingerboard, polish the frets a little bit, and then I'm going to restring this and set it up. And we can check the setup and then plug it in and see how it sounds. Alright, let's just get some quick neck dimensions here. So at the nut, it's a 1.68 or a 42.8 millimeters, so pretty standard. A lot of SGs are the same. And at the 12th fret, that whitens up to a 2.05 inches or a 52.09 millimeters. Neck depth at the first fret is 0.81, so pretty skinny, or a 20.76 millimeters. And at the 12th fret, it's a 0.91 inches or a 23.14 millimeters. And here's a look at the neck profile. So yeah, it's a pretty standard C. It does flatten a little bit by the 12th fret. And yeah, it feels like a pretty standard Gibson C neck, kind of like a slim taper 60s style. And I did manage to get quite a nice setup on this guitar. So if I'm using my notch straight edge, we can check the relief in the neck. So you can see that there's very little space between the notch straight edge and the fingerboard. So that tells me that the neck is doesn't have much relief in it. So the truss rod is set nice and tightly. And then here at the 3rd fret, when I use the 3rd fret, you can see that that string is resting almost right on top of that 1st fret. So that tells me that the truss rod is nice and tight, and we've got a well cut nut here, so we have good action in the cowboy chord area. And then on the 12th fret, if we use our depth gauge here, we can see that on the low E, it's sitting at just about a 1 millimeter, and our high E, just about a 0.75. So nice low action. This is about as low as this style of bridge can go on this guitar. So this thing's bottomed right out, but this is kind of where I like my action. If you want a little higher, you could always raise it up a bit. Alright, I'm just going to run up and down the fretboard to make sure there's no buzzing or fretting out anywhere. I like to speed up this part, but if you want to hear it in real time, just slow down your player to 25%. Very nice low action and no fretting out or buzzing anywhere. It's pretty nice to be able to get that low on, you know, a more budget instrument like this. There's some Gibsons that I've had that can't even get the action that low without having some issues. So, all right, let's go ahead and plug it in and hear how it sounds. Alright, I'm going to be using my 1965 Fender Bassman. It's just a really nice tube amp with lots of headroom, but it can get dirty when it wants to. And here are my settings. I'm also using a GTO Jim Jones Germanium Overdrive. Again, it's nice and transparent, so you can hear the individual characteristics of each guitar. I'm just going to start off with clean, and then we'll use a little bit of distortion. sounds nice, clean, a little bit darker sounding. I'm going to go ahead and try it with a little bit of dirt. Alright, final thoughts on the vintage Mick Abraham's signature SG style guitar. Yeah, I mean, every time I play these vintage guitars, the brand vintage, I'm always really blown away by the quality for the price points. I mean, this is a slab mahogany body. It's two-piece, but it's just a very nice piece of mahogany. It's got a mahogany neck. It's got a set neck construction with a long neck tenon. And yeah, the neck just feels really great, very similar to an SG. I think they pretty much nailed it. And I really like the tailpiece on this model. It's really well intonated with those compensated saddles. Like, you can really dial in the intonation. And then you've got these screws to go back and forth too. The fretwork on this guitar was really, really nice. Just nice rounded level frets. I polished them up, so now they're super, super shiny. But I was able to get the action really, really nice and low, which sometimes on cheaper guitars, they don't pay that much attention to the frets. There's not as much fine detail. So you don't really see this a lot on cheaper models, but I was able to get the action really nice and low. And it really does play, and it feels great. It's nice and light too. There's not much neck dive, there's just a little bit. But it stayed in tune well, and it played well too. The pickup sounded a little bit muddy to me, like they lacked definition. Kind of all got kind of muddled together, a little dark sounding for my taste too. However, I mean, for $50 for a pickup set, you can see you can buy these on Amazon for you know, hum canceling P90 style pickups. They sound great for that price point for sure. And I'm sure I could dial them in with my amp a little bit better. I could turn up my treble, you know what I mean? Compensated for them being a little bit darker. I could brighten them up with my amplifier or pedals or what have you. Overall, very, very, very impressed with this guitar. And it's all original except for the replaced Grover vintage style tuners. And we managed to fix up the neck a little bit on the headstock rather. There were those gouges and they were color matched and drop filled. If you're interested in this guitar, I'm going to have it up for sale on the Reverb page. But other than that, thank you for tuning into Beckler Guitars and Repair. I'll have more for you really soon. Thanks a lot.